Hi everyone, this is Dragon GGY. This is the operator Hindsight for the new operator Hoederer. Hoederer is a 6-star crusher under the Guard class. This is a relatively new archetype introduced to the game. Trait of the archetype, attack enemy count equal to current block count, which is the same as Centurions except they are block 2, so they normally attack 2. But there is more to Crusher than what the trait says. First of all, they have the highest max HP stats in the game. The second highest is Juggernaut, and it's not even close. Hoederer has over 3,000 more max HP than Penance. They also have the highest attack stats out of all archetypes, slightly above Mystic Casters. So with these two big advantages comes pretty big cost. 1. Crushers have 0 defense from level 1 to max level, but know that their defense is not set to 0, so you can still give them external flat defense numbers, for example Shining Talent or Sculptor Skill 2. In other words, all coming damage are effectively true damage for Crushers, and that poses a huge threat to their survival. 2. They have the longest attack interval out of all guards at 2.5 seconds. The next in line is Dreadnought at 1.5 seconds. For a ground unit holding a lane, it is extremely rigid to have such a long attack interval. If you have experienced having Fortress block an enemy and punching them with the shield every 2.8 seconds, you will know how painful it feels. In fact, if you leave out Ambusher who doesn't block, Crusher and Fortress are the only two archetypes who have an attack interval beyond 2.5 seconds. Enemy can squeeze in so many attacks between that, not to mention Crushers are glass cannons with 0 defense. For this archetype, both the pros and the cons are very obvious, but overall the cons have been costing them a lot. So let's conclude where they are good and bad. For advantages, they tank arts damage as well as those high DPH but slow attacking enemies pretty well because they have a powerful HP pool to not get one shot. On the damage side, they have high DPH with the high base attack stat, so they can tackle high defense enemies. For disadvantages, they should not be used against fast attacking physical damage, and once they're in that situations, it gets really hard to sustain them, and you can tell from their designs that they are designed to hit hard but hit slow. So in terms of DPS, they really don't do an impressive job. So let's take a look at Hoederer's talent. Talent 1, attack increases to 110% when attacking. If the target is stunned or bound, increases to 140% instead. The stun from Hoederer himself always occur before damage calculation, so don't worry about that. This is a straightforward and crucial damage talent. There is a 110% non-conditional attack scales that always happen. Unfortunately, unlike how Suzerain is to Qiubai, Hoederer does not have a reliable supporter to provide stable stun or bind, because these two are two of the stronger CC in the game. Right now there are two relatively good combo, one being Innis, who provide 5-second bind to every enemy on first attack. If you put her behind Hoederer, her binds always land just the moment before Hoederer's damage register, which is nice. It makes sure that 2 attacks can benefit from the 140% scale. Another choice would be Arc with module level 3. It provides a very high stun coverage with just auto attacks, and Hoederer can take 2 Arc skill 3 during his own skill 3, which is very long. Talent 2, self and the ally on the tile behind obtains 18% Sanctuary, 21% at potential 5. Nothing much to this. Mathematically, a unit benefits the most from Sanctuary when they are 0 defense and 0 resistance, so it makes a lot of sense for Hoederer to have this as a survival bonus, especially against arts damage, and it also eases out the pressure of healers trying to sustain him. Having that effect also to whoever behind is good, but most of the time, just not that impactful. Now let's get into the skills. My recommendation is Skill 3 Mastery 3 over Skill 1 Mastery 3, and Skill 2 is not recommended for Mastery. I'm gonna say this first and foremost. Although both Skill 1 and Skill 2 looks like typical AFK skill designs, they are those typical examples of good on paper but not so good in practice. So I generally don't recommend masteries for Skill 1 and 2 for lane holding purpose, but you can decide for yourself. Skill 1, the next attack deals 260% of attack as physical damage and restores 25% HP to self. 0/2 Power Strike type of skill. It's got a decent DPH, and having self-sustain is good. But there are big problems with this skill. Number 1, it is very easy to leak trying to lane hold with it. Number 2, it is also very easy for him to get out damaged. Most of the time, he won't be able to heal himself up. It's just that his enormous HP pool will help him stay alive for a bit longer. Another point to this is that he doesn't even cause stun at all with this skill, which wastes a large part of his damage potential and has to rely completely on others. Overall, not recommended, but the improvement from level 7 to Mastery 3 is massive. Skill 2 gets attack plus 40% by picking the skill, and can switch between the normal state and having attack interval increased by 0.5 seconds into 3 seconds, block plus 1, and attack stuns the target for 1 second. This is the typical switching skill like Silver Ash and Mountain Skill 2 with a 5-second cooldown. And behold, this skill has an even worse DPS than skill 1 because it puts part of the strength at the guaranteed stun. The selling point of this skill is the potential stun lock. Other than that, I don't quite see the reason to really lane hold with this skill. In case you haven't realized, both attack interval plus and plus 1 block are devastating for Hoederer as a crusher. Blocking one more enemy is taking an additional share of damage for a melee unit, and for the 0 defense Hoederer, it's a murder. That plus the now 3-second attack interval means that he's spending more time idle while the enemies are tearing him apart. So the block plus 1 is only there for him to stun lock one more target. If you use this in the hope of cosplaying Blaze, he will fail miserably. Target audience for this skill is long attack interval enemies, not for mobs. So let's dive into the stun part. Hoederer has a 3-second attack interval with this skill, meaning that with proper handling, he would be able to reliably stun lock enemies with attack interval equal to 3 seconds, or a multiple of 3 seconds. And good news for Hoederer, there are actually a good amount of enemies who fall into that category. And then because the cycle is 3 seconds with 1 second stun, enemy with attack startup animation longer than 2 seconds can also be stun locked, most typical example being the rock golems. You can also fine-tune the attack interval of both the enemy and Hoederer to create a stun lock scenario, but these are not stable like the VD Skill 1 store strat in CC4, and will require some external help to maintain the store in a longer timeline. Finally, with attack speed buffs or CC relics in integrated strategy, you can make the stun lock possible on any enemy that is not immune to stun. And because mastery for this skill does not change the attack interval or the stun time, it's completely the same performance throughout. You can even leave Hoederer in E1 in IS for that reason. That's also the reason why I don't really recommend the mastery. Skill 3 loses 100 HP per second and deals 200 true damage per second to enemies that attacks or attacked by Hoederer. Attack range plus 1 tile, max HP plus 60%, attack plus 120%, and attacks restore 5% HP to self and has a 25% chance to stun the target for 5 seconds. A 40/50 and 70 second super long duration skill. By Hoederer himself, the expected stun coverage for the skill is 56.1%, which means that more than half of the attacks are expected to be enduring the 140% attack scale. He's expected to deal 146k damage, but that's over the course of 70 seconds. The DPS for this skill is just still around 2000. During the skill, Hoederer will have above 10k HP, but the HPS from himself is merely at 116. Now let's do a breakdown of this skill. When it starts, the current HP and max HP both gets plus 60%. Due to how hard it is to sustain Hoederer, you should try to activate the skill when he's still healthy in order to avoid having a big HP hole to fill. This is especially relevant for using Arc Skill 3 with it. You should always try to activate Hoederer's skill first. With the big HP pool, he can tank a ton of damage and is almost impossible to get one shot by anything. If Hoederer attacks non-stop during the skill, he can get a 216 HPS on his own. But since he's also losing 100 HP per second for whatever reason, he only has a 116 effective HPS. So again, for most situations, he can't stay alive on his own all the way, and that leads us to stunning and not stunning during his skill. Stunning an enemy means Hoederer deals more damage to them, so they don't stay and threaten him much longer. It also stops them from damaging him, and that adds to his survival as well. So it is massively different when you can roll the stun versus when you don't. In short, it's RNG. So to conclude the pros and cons, again, high DPH and high HP pool. Yes, he does take a lot of damage, but all that matters is that he survives long enough to get the job done. That's the reason why this skill is very good for dueling elites and bosses. For cons, it just doesn't make sense for a crusher without the skills to stay on field for 60 seconds waiting for the skill to come back. That is way too much. Then, like I said, the RNG behind the skill is massive. It makes the difference between life and death, both for Hoederer and his enemy. And it gets extra tedious against enemies immune to stun. And finally, the true damage DOT is just not very impactful. It's not affected by buffs, and is fixed at 200. Let's spend some time to review Hoederer's kit. As a crusher, he has high DPH but low DPS throughout, so he's not designed to take on the mob killing job. He has a unique survival approach. Others are doing it by having good defense and resistance, HP recovery, or fast skill regen. But he just says, nah, I'll tank all of them, thanks to the massive HP pool and sanctuary. It's not hard to realize that he faces almost the same pressure against mobs and elites, so it's not hard to draw the conclusion that he should be used mostly for dueling elites and bosses. There are key problems that limited Hoederer from excellence. Number one, he is the hardest lane holder in the game to be sustained. If you are a new player, you don't have his sanctuary talent in E1, so he's tanking true damage from every enemy, and your healers will have a nightmare trying to heal him back up. Number two, long attack interval. It leads to a series of problems. First and foremost, leaking between skills or even attacks, because in the end, crushers are not AoE like Reapers, they only hit 2 normally. Second, taking more damage between attacks, and any damage is threatening for him. And because of the slow attack, it makes a big difference between triggering and not triggering a stun. And for number 3, the design of Hoederer's skills is very split. Skill 1 has the best sustain, but no stun at all. Skill 2 is the only one that can reliably stun enemies, but comes with no sustain, even longer attack interval, and block count plus that is detrimental to his survival. Skill 3 has both sustain and stun, but the sustain is watered down with a HP loss that comes out of nowhere, and the stun goes RNG. Skill 3 has the overall best consistent damage, survivability, making it the better skill for Hoederer, but at the end of the day, I'd say it still left much to be desired. For notable performances, honestly speaking, not much. Like I said, relics in IS help to make him more capable of carrying out stun locks with skill 2, and stunning an enemy in skill 3 with CC relics available should be able to lock them in place for a long time. In conclusion, Hoederer is a 6-star crusher that mainly functions based on DPH, stun CC, and tanking with high HP pool. He also has several problems that compromise using him, which more or less are originated from the problems of the crusher archetype itself. For daily, I have him at 4. There is one characteristic to him that I mentioned, is that it feels equally tedious for him to deal with mobs, especially mob waves, and to deal with elites and bosses. 50-50 with everyone, you can say. So my recommendation is to put him against elites and bosses, and don't really expect him to be able to do the typical lane hold. Most of the time, it does not go well. He requires a large amount of healing, which may prove too much for beginners and too redundant for veterans. For advanced, I rate him at 4 as well. Stunlock with skill 2 is a dream not too far away. High DPH gives him good resilience against attack decrease or enemy's defense increase situations. You can even argue that having 0 defense makes him immune to defense reduction enemies or debuffs, but in the end, he's still weak against max HP and attack speed debuffs. An enemy with increased attack and attack speed can still destroy him fast. Finally, let's take a look at the pool recommendation for the next 6 months. Virtuosa and Ray have proven their capability in hardcore content with the latest contingency contract Underdawn, with Ray being in the final 12 op roster. Operators like Dagenbrecher, Shu, and Zuole and Ella all got to shine as well. To be honest, my take is that Hoederer should be an easy skip for most players. The much better option will be Dagenbrecher in 2 months. Maybe save Hoederer for when Crusher module releases, since I think it's the archetype that is holding him back in some ways. Here are all the rating previews for upcoming operators. We are getting so close to the 5th anniversary of Arknights, and Arknights in 2024 has been throwing us with game-changing operators. That trend is very likely to continue in May. I wouldn't hold your breath, but for a 5-year-old game, it is not uncommon for the older characters to gradually be replaced by newer ones. You may feel it, I feel it too, but I'm still happy with the state of the game right now and can't wait to see what's in store coming next. This marks the end of this episode. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in another one. Bye bye.